You're listening to I Love It When, and I'm your host, Mo. I'm a speaker, coach, and connector. You're in the right place if you're looking for some inspiration and you're ready to truly embrace who you are. My intention with this podcast is to help you see that you are so much more powerful than you realize. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of I Love It When with Margaret Smith. I'm your host. I go by Mo, and we are starting off this recording in my office because the first 2 minutes of the episode that we recorded in studio did not come out. And I wanted to make sure to give Tom a proper introduction. So this first part you'll see is in my office, and then we will move to the Third Wheel podcasting studio in Seattle, Washington. So my guest today is Tom.
Hello.
Sitting here with me. He is the president of MyMyToyStore and also my boyfriend and partner. So I'm really excited to have him on the episode today and specifically start off by talking about his journey with healing. There are a number of different topics that we're going to cover with Tom over a series of different episodes, but I thought this was the first one. I thought this was the best one to start off with first. So Tom, would you introduce yourself for us, please?
Yes. First, I'm really happy to be here, excited to be with Mo Smith, speaker, facilitator, wonderful human being, professional development coach, and my partner. About myself. I like to call myself Chief Wonderful Toys Officer of MyMyToyStore. I am a e-commerce company and a storefront in historic downtown Everett. However, it's been quite a journey to get to this wonderful point in my life. I am a kid who grew up crisscrossing the country. I lived in Indiana, Illinois, Texas, West Virginia, Louisiana, settled in New Jersey. Then I was fortunate enough to attend Princeton University, where I graduated with an economics degree. I then decided to go to New York City to become an attorney. I practiced law on and off for about 16, 17 years, practicing litigation. And in that time, I decided to pursue as a hobby selling toys online. And I've been fortunate enough to grow that into a business. And a few years ago, I went full-time with that business. And it's been quite a ride. Hopefully I get to share some of that with all you folks. Thanks.
And you were also, like you're going to share in the episode moving forward, quite a swimmer.
That is true. I was a competitive swimmer for a total of 14 years, including all through college, Division I.
Mm-hmm. Well, this episode, thank you to Alicia Connolly with Shep Creative, is going to be dropped tomorrow, which is December 22nd, which gives you still 3 days to go buy some toys from MyMyToyStore before Christmas gets here, okay? You can buy them in person at his storefront in downtown Everett, Washington. If you happen to be in the Pacific Northwest area, we'd love to meet you in person. Or you can order them online, get them maybe a few days after Christmas, maybe for a New Year's gift. So
All right.
Thank you all for tuning in. And I'm really excited for you to listen to this episode, hear all about healing and Tom's journey with healing. It's a fantastic example, especially as I love talking with Tom about men in particular and the healing journey, because it's just something that's still really brand new to a lot of people and not really spoken about often. So here we go. Rather than jumping right into healing and what we're going to talk about today, we actually have a question from our audience. And so I put it out there on Instagram if anybody had a question for you and I, not really knowing what we were going to talk about in our first episode. And so an audience member asked, how do we keep it playful in our relationship? So I thought we'd start off with that before we launch into healing.
Okay. Well, internet audience, so appreciate this question and this opportunity. I will take this opportunity right now that if you are parents, to give a little viewer discretion advised. If you are parents of Margaret Smith or Thomas J. Harrison III, you may hear references to sexual situations, and just deal with it because, yeah, we're both adults. And then on a serious note, during this podcast, you may hear some references or descriptions that could be hard to hear. Things like physical violence. Just know that might occur in this podcast. Mm-hmm. How do we keep it playful? It's really, that's a great question. Mm-hmm. And there are two things that I think of. And then one we could probably
do a whole podcast episode on.
Of play. One thing is that it forced me to really think about it. And one thing that I realized is that play is intentional. So to play with someone else, with anyone, you don't accidentally do it. You never accidentally go out. You intentionally decide you're going to do something. And so I learned that with my son. He's now 15. When he was quite young, we would go to the grocery store. We'd do errands, and I could either bore him to death by not interacting with him, or I could bore myself to death, or I could make myself super anxious because I'm just thinking about what he needs, how he's doing. Mm-hmm. Or we could have some fun. Mm-hmm. And so I made it very intentional to play with him and to do things and to look at the world a certain way and to make him smile and open his eyes up. Mm-hmm. So one thing with our relationship is it's an intentional thing. When I get home or we get together. What that also has meant is a recognition of when I'm doing something out of habit or I'm doing something because I'm just letting something on the outside influence me and I'm not even aware of it. Mm-hmm. So, for example, you guys in the audience, me, if I find myself, hey, I want to go home and I want to pour myself a drink, that's just a habit from something. It's not like a part of my body is saying, hey, the body part that wants a drink, is cueing me to do something. That doesn't exist. Yeah. So it's a habit that's coming from something that you've seen, that you've witnessed, or in your own experience earlier. So I had to kind of recognize, hey, what's in my mind? And then, what do I really want to do? And what my body would come back with over and over again as I learned to listen to it more is, I just want to hang out with Margaret. I just want to go home and just hang out. And that meant, I'm not going to just reach for this habit. I'm not going to do the habit of watching TV. I'm going to do the habit or start a new habit of, hey, how's your day? What's going on? How are things?
Or as you like to call it, unscripted time.
Unscripted time. Yeah. And honestly, the unscripted time is like a process. So it's easy just to kind of check in and and
how's your day? How's your day?
Yeah, how's your day? To do the download and share. Yeah. But then there's this intentional and deliberate thing that I had to learn and train myself to do to get to that point where I'm looking at you and I'm out of script. Yeah. I don't have anything else to share. Yeah. Nothing else in my mind. And to hold your eye contact and be like, now what? And what that always leads to is super fun. I mean, just fun. Yeah. Well, I feel like you and I are both like Robin Williams hanging out with, some other comedian, and we just kind of riff off of each other. Yeah. We think about things, we goof around, or we decide, hey, let's watch that show. Mm-hmm. So that's
Yeah.
where the play comes from.
No, that's a really good point. I think getting past that point of whatever script anybody might have who's watching that you have with family members, not just your partner, once you reach that point where you don't know what to say, kind of letting that silence be there and then see what happens next. And then I also realized when you were talking about Michael too, that from the time that I was little, one of my aunts, we call her Coco, Aunt Coco, she actually wrote me a note that I've kept ever since. And she said, you would always make everything fun. And it was like, even a trip to the grocery store, I made it an adventure. And I think you and I are both really good at that. And then really good also at just being so completely ourselves now that we've been with each other for 2 years, that we can just be ourselves. And that includes being silly and I just probably act like I'm 15 or 10 years old most of the time.
Well,
And I think you realized real quickly that I like to play a lot and I like to be playful, and it's a very great way to release stress too and just be myself, because that is who I am.
that's right.
Yeah.
Great way. Yeah.
Yeah.
All
This is
those
actually a great
things.
segue into talking about healing, because that's been, I think, a part of both of our journeys, is being playful in order to counteract some of the serious stuff that we talk about quite often.
Right.
So, okay, first question for you.
Okay.
What does healing, or being on a journey of healing, mean to you?
Great. It is, so I could think about it kind of what's the opposite of that. And the opposite is being guarded, being closed, not acknowledging, and trying to achieve and just get the things done. That, I think, has been such a big focus of my life for a while, is that part. So the healing is acknowledging how I actually feel, and to want to feel better. And so it's very rooted in how my body feels, how my energy feels, how my spirit feels, and wanting to feel better. So it's interesting, because there has to be an acknowledgement that there's work to do, or I'm not where I want to be when it comes to how I feel. And then that means, then there's some damage, there's something that needs to be healed.
Yeah. I love that. So basically recognizing that you don't feel how you want to feel. Okay. So let's start with a story about how you came to that conclusion that you wanted and needed to feel better.
Okay. My first, it really takes me way back to think about that. So what comes to mind is when I was started competitive swimming. I started at 8 years old. I enjoyed practice. I enjoyed swimming and learning how to swim. I enjoyed the strokes, and my coaches were cool. I enjoyed my teammates too. And then there's this thing I find out about, which is called meets, swim meets, competitions. And so we find out that there's going to be a meet, and my mom signs me up for it, and then she brings me to the meet. And I remember this was just me. I was 8. My brother wasn't swimming yet.
And you were 8 years old.
I was 8 years old.
Wow.
First meet, this is in West Virginia, Sun Aquatics. It was an outdoor pool, and early morning. So we're there's some mist. And what I remember is being really, really nervous. And I had a full group of events to do. And what I remember is that I was so nervous that between every event I threw up.
Oh, gosh.
I also remember that seemed like for every event I won the heat. So I enjoyed, like, hey, this is something that I'm actually good at and can achieve. I was terribly just overcome with anxiety and nerves. And it didn't go away. So the next meet, I'm a bundle of nerves between every event. In one meet, finally, I just got fed up with it. So I'm, just fed up, feeling sick to my stomach, and it doesn't go away until the meet's all the way over. So it was between some events, and I went out to the lobby of the meet, and there was a vendor, and he was selling books. And I looked at the book rack, and I saw a book, thin volume, Psychology for Swimmers. I bought that book. I read it, and within like 5 pages, it explained exactly what was going on with me.
Wow.
And that was, there wasn't anything wrong. It's that I cared. I cared about my events. I wanted to do well. And so I was putting a lot of, and that's normal. Mm-hmm. And then there were all these tips and tricks. And so one of the tips that I really took to heart and implemented was reading between events. Mm-hmm. So I just would grab novels and I would devour them during swim meets, and it kept my mind off of the event and what I cared about. And then I would go through a process in getting ready for the competition, for the event itself, where I then activate my body, get it loose, and then I, through visualization and some other stuff, like I get that adrenaline going just at the right moment. So that was the first time that I remember where it's like, oh, there's a problem, and it's emotions. Mm-hmm. It's a problem in my body. I can learn how to fix it. Mm-hmm. And I did. And I learned how to fix it outside. I had to learn. I couldn't just figure it out myself.
Mm-hmm. Do you think there's always been events like that have happened in different times in your life that have prompted you to get help or to ask for help?
Oh, very much so. Yeah. Very much so. It unfortunately usually comes from a place of desperation, which that's fairly normal, and it's okay. We shouldn't be embarrassed about it, having to reach out for help like that. But it usually came from something like that. When I was in law school, I went to Fordham Law in New York City. Is the first year of law school, and it is very much kind of like that Paper Chase movie. Just such a volume of cases to read and prepare for, that, it's really tough. It's a lot of volume. And so I would prepare for my cases. I'd stay up late into the night, writing my case outlines and getting my reading done, and then I couldn't go to sleep. So I'd be laying there trying to get to sleep because my mind's just kind of racing, and I'm, all a jitter. And that led me to do two things. One, which is to start reading fiction again at night. I was like, hey, I can do that. I can let myself wind down. But the second thing is I was wandering around my neighborhood, and I came across a Tai Chi center. I was like, I've always wondered about Tai Chi. And so I went to a couple classes, became a member, and learned the long form. And that was one of the first times, I think it was the first time, that I explicitly focused on and felt energy circulation, where, you're feeling an energy center, and I could feel the difference by doing the movements, and I could actually feel the energy. Wow. It's kind of a nervous system energy, but it's real. It felt it flowing through my extremities.
Wow.
And being able to direct it and connect with it. And that was really cool. Yeah.
I love that. Can you share, fast forward, we'll talk more about some of your history as well, but can you share a story from the last 2 or 3 months about healing and kind of where you're at now and maybe what you've noticed?
Yeah, I can be pretty recent. So I joined the Brain and Body Wellness Center in Everett. I the owner of that center, and the instructor is Maki Perry. So I've been going to classes for about a year, a little over a year. And it started from an occasional thing to a 2 to 3 day a week practice, to using those practices daily, and also attending some workshops where you're really doing concentrated energy work and concentrated body work. So what I've noticed by doing that is that I'd say maybe it's like 2 months ago, when I'm doing my daily practice in the morning, that I would imagine something, or a memory would pop up, and it was doing something to my body. I was feeling it in my body, and I had that memory, and it's, whether it's a memory or I'm fantasizing about some sort of confrontation. And at some point, and this really is like 2 or 3 months ago, it's like, oh, that's anger. That's what that is.
Yeah.
I know, exactly. It's very familiar, because I used to swim with that in my body. With I would do practices where I would just like be enraged, or I'd be in a situation, whether it's at school or outside of school, or at home, and I'm just like flooded with anger, but I'm remembering something, or I am fantasizing about a confrontation. Well, I would have done this to this guy, and so that was coming up when I would do these morning meditative body practices, and so I would feel it, and I'm like, oh, and I would acknowledge it, and then I would let it go. I could actually let it go. And I hadn't been able to do that before. It would just, over a long, protracted period of time before, it would fizzle out. But, or I would have to like distract myself, basically. Like, in other words, suppress it.
Yeah.
You got to suppress it by distracting it, and then you just like tamp it down. So that's something that it's super powerful. And powerful is not the word. It feels so good. So good.
Yeah.
To let it come up,
Yeah.
and then acknowledge it and let it go completely. And then you can move on to something else. The other thing I noticed when I would do that, so frustration, anger would be things that would come up fairly regularly in the last few months. Now, what comes up are memories of happy times, and envisioning things that I want to do that would be fun. And I'm like, oh, that's joy. That's happiness. And so I let that come up. And then I let that go too, because you got to let your emotions go.
Yeah.
There's no need to hold on to them. And so I let that go, and then more stuff will then come up.
That's a perfect story to share from when you first experienced Tai Chi. So something that we talk about a lot is how men are not really encouraged to talk about feelings and emotions. And you've already kind of mentioned this a little bit and with what you've shared. But talking about feelings, being vulnerable, something like Brene Brown talks about a lot, and I follow her work and what she does. But it's still not the norm to be in a conversation with a man in a business meeting, or in just, when we go out to dinner and we meet somebody at the bar. It's not the norm. And you have really started to make it part of your norm. So what has it been like to bravely do that? Because it's been a brave act. I've seen you in the last 2 years do it more and more, where you're not afraid to ask somebody how they feel about something, or share something about yourself that maybe in the past you wouldn't have shared.
Gotcha. So I think most people might be thinking, okay, this is that point in the story where he reveals some hidden truth, or some like great thing that he came across. And what it is for me is being aware of basically positive feedback. It's not, I'm not that complicated. So, when I ask for help, I found I would get results. When I asked for help earlier, I found that people would help earlier. When I would ask for help and share, I would find that people would volunteer to do things. If I did it earlier in the process before I got into crisis, then I found, then things go smoother and I feel better. So I found that and I find that in very just rooted in daily experience kind of things. So when I made my decision to move here in August of, I guess that's 2021, right? I didn't give myself much time to move from Denver. But what I did is I shared, hey, this is what I'm moving out. I told my neighbors, and then one of my neighbors offered to help me with packing, to help with the running of my store so I could devote time to packing, the online business. Another neighbor who I knew fixed cars and had been a mechanic in the past, I reached out to him and said, I'm driving halfway across the country with my car. Could you help me? Or is there, is there something that I can do? And he's like, I will, you just tell me when you're free and we'll work on it on weekends. And he took a look under the hood. He helped me rehab my car enough so that it could make the trip out here. So it was just kind of not being stubborn and actually being aware.
Which kind of leads me to think about, I can't help but think about Laramie, Wyoming. And as part of your journey from Denver up to Everett, and how every time you said yes to something that felt good. So what you just described, that process of like earlier on in the process saying, hey, I need some help, or just sharing what's going on, it felt better, faster, and things went smoother. I also noticed that every time you said yes to something that you really wanted, amazing things would happen. Miraculous things would just like appear. People would appear. Opportunities appeared. So when your car kind of broke down in Laramie, Wyoming, you got to hang out in that town for a couple nights, and it was like an adventure. It was not a pain in the butt, really. Like, it's not great to break down on the road in the middle of nowhere, but you got to hang out in Laramie, Wyoming, and
if you're gonna get if you're gonna break down in a part of the country, it turns out that Laramie, Wyoming, now is a great place to do so. It's a college town, so there was an initial moment, my car like literally just said, I'm not towing a trailer anymore because a Chevy Sonic is not designed to trail anything. And so a state trooper just, when I stopped, a state trooper happened to be like stationed right across the street in the median. So he came over. Turns out he grew up in Everett.
Are you kidding me?
Right. And he grew up in Everett, knew Everett. And so he helped me out. And then I called the U-Haul insurance, and they helped me out too, get everything situated, and treated me to dinner that night. So making that decision to like, hey, this is happening. I'm going to be stuck here. Let's not force it. Let's do what has to be done, but let's not force it. And then things actually lined up that whole weekend. I would go out to dinner, meet people, hang out,
Yeah.
The next day, cool things would happen. Yeah, there's something about when the act of sharing and the act of sharing is vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just sharing anything is vulnerable. And so just the act of sharing, and going outside of your comfort, even if it's a small thing. Yeah, what I found in Laramie and what I've continued to find is it creates cool opportunities.
Mm-hmm. So when you come up across that feeling, you named stubbornness earlier. I also like to think of it like resistance. When you know, like, oh, I want to ask for help, but you feel that feeling of like, oh, but no, don't do it. How do you deal with that? How have you, because that has been a habit you've had to create, a new habit.
Yes. So I wonder, so I guess before I answer that, because I think it's important for viewers and listeners to kind of understand what that really means. So this is what it meant for me, is when as I'm growing up, I had to do things like, hey, homework has to be done. Well, it's like, this is me growing up. I have a long day at school, and then I've got a little bit of a break, and then I've got to go to swim practice. Doesn't matter how I feel. It's got to get done. And so I've got a little break. I could either read in the car, but most of the time I was doing homework, no matter how I felt. Whether you're tired, and you're always tired, hungry, I was always hungry. And then you get in the pool, and I swim as hard as I possibly can because I want the results at the meet. I want the training to pay off. I would swim till exhaustion, then beyond exhaustion, with very little rest. I would get out of the pool, and then we'd have to go home. I would actually not eat because I wanted that big meal. And so sometimes I'd actually cramp up on the way home. And I just had to hold out for the meal. No snacks, just doing it. And that was because of just me. That was my choice. And then eat, then get a little bit of downtime, and then I have to finish up homework. And there will always be homework to do. And then do it until it's done, and then go to sleep. No time to do anything else. It's bedtime. Then get to do it all over again. 6 days a week, because Saturdays were also swim practice days, and then yard work days, and all day project days around the house. So 6 days a week. And so I describe all that because that's resistance. Because every step of the way, I had to say, doesn't matter how I feel, you got to keep going. You got a 5-minute break. You got a 30-second break. You got a 5-second break between sets. Keep going. Keep going for 16 hours a day, 6 days a week. And that's what resistance is. That's what stubbornness is. You're just pushing yourself beyond and not giving yourself an adequate rest. And so the opposite of that, what I now do is I become aware of how I feel. And so the resistance really now is more of an emotional thing. So I don't know, an example is a fairly recent example is I'll come home and you'll go to give me a hug, and I will feel my body tense up. And then I acknowledge that by sharing it, by saying, did you feel that? I'll say that. Did you feel that? And you're like, yeah, I felt that I'm resisting being greeted warmly when I get home, because my habit, the thing I had to do is get home, you got to jump into work. You've got 5 minutes. Don't bother turning on the TV. You got stuff to do. And that meant, for me, do not give in to feeling good. So, no time. There's no time for hugs. No time for that. You can't sink into it. You might as well not, because it'll just feel bad 5 minutes from now when you got to rip yourself away from it. From feeling good. So just keep going. Just keep going. Grab some water. Keep going.
My favorite thing is when you say, "Oh, it burns."
Yes. And so now we play with it. And when I feel that resistance, I do like a Gollum impression, like, it burns. It burns. Because that resistance, it actually is in my chest. It'll come up there, and then I'll be like, okay, you can let this go.
It's a really good example. So we talk a lot about men of color and rest specifically. And I told you when we were on our way to the studio today recording that this is such a great segue, because Tony Patillo and I talked about it just a little bit, just began that conversation about rest specifically with people of color. And you and I have talked about that a lot. Rest is not something that we're really taught how to do or encouraged to do. And so I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to that and how you've begun to be aware of how often you will work and not rest and resist rest.
Right. And then I'll also try and describe that it's not a logical connection between rest and success, but there is a direct connection. It's not a logical connection. But it is a direct connection. So try and prompt me to go into that.
Okay, that's something but you and I have both been playing with.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's been fun to share and kind of see each other, see the success that's happening as we start to figure out that balance.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. So I think this goes back to a bit of how I was raised, what I observed, and so things that I was taught directly by my father, my father's father, to an extent, but kind of less than an extent of my great aunts and uncles and my grandfather. The Hazelriggs, this is my mom's side of the family. There were 3-generation dairy farmers in Chickamauga, Georgia. I saw them kind of going around in their retirement years doing stuff, but they didn't work from sun up to sundown. What I observed with them is they walk around, do work, chit chat, talk. They do go from this thing to that thing. It was a different kind of a work. With my father, the work, the idea of, this is a Saturday morning or Saturday. It's after swim practice, then we get to eat. And then at some point, my dad cuts it short and says, okay, time to go. Grab a shovel, 2 shovels, grab a wheelbarrow, get your work gloves, and a couple of things. And we'd wheel it over to a project. He'd describe that project. My brother and I would then do that project. And then when we're done, we're hoping, like every normal human being, every kid would hope, like, you're done for the day. Yeah. And we might see our friends going by in bikes. And then we'd get done. My dad would say, okay, grab your stuff and go over here. And then we go to the next project and we go get that done. And then maybe there's a break for lemonade. I really remember this, vividly in Louisiana, where it's hot and humid all the time. And then we get another project. And you're just hoping at this point that this is the end. And sometimes it would be, or sometimes there would be a fourth project. But what my Dad didn't do is say, hey, we've got 4 things to do today. These are the things. If you get 4 of them done, that's great. If you only get 3 of them done, that's great. These are the 3, take a break. He'd never give you the whole
So you just didn't
thing.
know. You had no idea.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
And not knowing is a form of stress. Puts your body under stress. So sorry to kind of go afield with this, but
Oh, it's good.
it kind of occurred to me the absurdity of it when I finally watched this movie Cool Hand Luke with Paul Newman. And there's this like iconic scene where he's a prisoner in a prison camp. It's like a chain gang type of camp. And the warden has had it with Paul Newman's character, who is defiant, and he's going to try and break him. So he makes Paul Newman, he has one of the security guards wake him up and say, hey, you've got to what is your dirt doing in the boss man's yard? You've got to get that dirt out of here. And so the guard makes Paul Newman dig this deep hole for hours. Paul Newman, does it. He's tired. And then another guard comes over and says, hey, what's your dirt doing in the boss man? What's your hole doing in the boss man's yard? And he makes him fill it all up. And then after that, another guard comes back, hey, I thought I told you had to get the boss man's dirt out of the yard. Makes him dig it up again. Another guard comes back. It's now late at night. And that made me think of my Saturdays. Like, it's just one thing to another. Don't know when you're going to get done. You think you're done, and you're not. And so the concept of rest is the space between the arduous task. And you don't know when they're going to end. And they don't. And so I feel like I know I was raised with this concept that rest is very intermittent. You only do it when it's necessary, and don't do too much of it. Don't get comfortable with it. I think it and then has an impact on how you feel good things, and how you acknowledge achievement, how you acknowledge just feeling good. So I do think about the movie The Pursuit of Happiness. Great movie with Will Smith, based on a true story. And there is a scene towards the end of the movie after Will Smith's character has achieved, and he's achieved it under terrible circumstances, overwhelming odds. He's overcome all of these things, and he's finally gotten there. He's gotten the job offer that he has toiled and suffered for.
Yeah.
And he goes outside, and there's people swirling around, oblivious, and he claps his hands, and he says, "This is a moment of happiness." And he allows himself 60 seconds.
Yeah.
And then he has to go right back to it. That's how African American men, that's how my generation, that's how my father's generation were raised to think of rest and acknowledging, like, rest, happiness, rest, acknowledging something good. Good job. 60 seconds. Fleeting. Don't get comfortable. Yeah. And it's a tough way to, it's a very tough way to live.
One of the things that I've noticed that you've done differently, and I don't know if you did this before I met you, maybe this is not brand new, but taking a bath, like, not something you would really do. And now you have gotten to a point where you start to make time for it. And it's a very relaxing, longer than 60 seconds, very therapeutic, feel good moment.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it goes to the idea that, or what I think about is how I would take you could only take longer breaks in this one instant, and that's vacation.
Oh, if I say when you were sick.
Now, well, that's like forced
Yeah.
vacation. But vacation, we'd all go on a family vacation, and we get to hang out by the beach. We get to eat food. We get to, kind of indulge. We get to go around, and there's less of an agenda. There's less of where there is no toil. Let's do this. Let's get this done. Let's get that done. But you only get that for that week.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only context for that.
Yeah.
So that's so the idea of doing that in day to day, that you can create space in your day to day for that kind of rest, where it's extended, where it's total relaxation, has been something definitely new, and it's super important. So there are a few things I've noticed by allowing for that in the day to day, whether it's a bath, whether it's whether it's me actually going to the bathroom when I need to go to the bathroom and not holding it to get the next thing done, whether it's an actual lunch break, walking around, going home and just being. What I've noticed is by deliberately, intentionally resting, I make better decisions. I decide I actually am able to figure out what I really want to do. Whether that's in just a personal context, or it's a business context, or it's a life context. I actually make better decisions. My mood is much better. I'm regulated. I am calmer. I'm present for people. I create an energy that's inviting and calm for people to be around. So those are some things that I've noticed just by being intentional about rest in the day-to-day.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, we have to kind of wrap up for today, but I want to end with, for somebody that's watching, what are 2 things that they could do to start healing, and wherever they may be in their journey? What would you recommend?
I would recommend I'd recommend a couple of things. One is experiment with some form of body movement as a practice, something that's daily, if you can, or something that's regular. And so for men, that should probably immediately make you think, oh, I should go to the gym. No, it doesn't mean that. Low impact exercise is super important and has great emotional benefits, also has great circulatory benefits. It does not have to be a high impact. It doesn't have to be sweaty and energetic to be valuable for your body and good for your body. So that would be one thing. Find an activity. Low impact is preferable. The second thing is, and just kind of watch how that leads somewhere. Second thing would be start asking questions of yourself. Why am I doing this? When you sit down to just immediately put on the TV, when you just ask yourself, why am I doing this? And ask yourself where that's coming from, where that habit's coming from, where that thing that you say is coming from, that way you act is coming from. Just start asking yourself some questions and see where the answers come from. For me, what that would lead to is, oh, that's not me at all. I saw this person do that. That's what I watched my dad do for years. That's what my brother and I would do. That came from law school.
Yeah.
I don't need to do that.
Those are 2 great tips. All right, so wrap up the episode today. I think you want to give a shout out to the artist who you currently have showing in your shop.
Oh,
the hat.
So I've created some cool products in my store with partnering with Hyper of Hype Murals. And so this is a reversible bucket hat. And he's also created original art for a scarf as well as for a water bottle that I have in my store. And this is just like perfect for me. It's this perfect way to express yourself. You can take this reversible hat and do a half Gilligan. You could do the full Gilligan. You could do a side Gilligan. You can really have a lot of fun with it. But shout out to Hyper.
Good. Okay. And how?
And to Scott of P3G.
Oh, Scott. Yes.
Yes.
Can't forget Scott. What would you say your current I Love It When is for your life right now?
I love it when I get to intentionally play with people every day.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for checking this episode out. Please be sure to go to Tom's website, MyMyToyStore.com, and check out all the different holiday sales that he has going on right now and throughout the rest of the year. And thank you so much for joining me for your first episode.
Thank you, Mo. Appreciate it. This is great.